My name is Amrita. I work here at St Ethelburga Centre for Reconciliation and Peace in London, and I work primarily on two different programmes. One is a public programme of events focusing on different themes on the topic of new economics, and the second piece of work I do is to coordinate a programme, a youth leadership programme called the Spiritual Ecology Fellowship. And my background is in the field of new economics. I studied a master's at Schumacher College in Devon in economics for transition, which was looking at how we can create low carbon, highly resilient and high well-being economies and really create deep systemic change that we really need at this time. I've also worked on a campaign called Eradicating Ecocide, which is a global campaign for an international law of ecocide. And I've worked at the think tank Chatham House, the International Institute for International Affairs, as well. New economics is difficult to describe because it's a very emerging new field which really takes its inspiration and theory and practice from many different fields of knowledge, from the new sciences, systems thinking, complexity science, but also the field of anthropology and the field of psychology. So it's often described like a bit of a bowl of spaghetti, which is really a spectrum of thinking on different alternatives to the current mainstream economic paradigm. And like I said, these alternatives have been drawn from different fields, so it's difficult to kind of categorize and define new economics in any single way. But I would say that the main thing about new economics is that it's rooted in a different set of values than our current system. And the kinds of values that new economics seeks to embody really are that of ecological sustainability, social justice, generally localization, and deep democratic governance as well. So yeah, I would describe new economics as kind of being very much focused around those general principles, but within that there's really a spectrum of understanding around whether we need a total transformation of the new system or whether we can bring a new economics into the current way of thinking, so it can be more of a transition, or whether we need to completely create an alternative. So we've been hosting a public series of events on new economics, focusing on different themes. So we have 5 different events, and we've had three of them already, 2 in the last year, and 2 have already happened this year. And the different themes that we've been focusing on are looking at the transition town movement, which is an international movement which grew out of permaculture, where communities kind of get together and look at how they can create an energy descent plan for their communities, but also an alternative economic blueprint, so how they can relocalize their communities and start really participating in their local economy to make it really resilient in the face of the kind of economic and ecological challenges that we face. So the first event we had Rob Hopkins, who is the founder of the Transition Town Movement, which was wonderful, and he shared lots of inspiring stories of different communities around the world in many different contexts who are actively practicing the transition principles and are creating a real kind of transition and transformation in their communities. So he shared some really inspiring stories in lots of different sectors, from energy to food growing to conflict resolution. So that was really great. And in the second event, we focused on the not-for-profit revolution. So this is really looking at kind of new models of economic organisation, legal organisation, such as social enterprise or a community interest company, where the key purpose, the purpose of the whole enterprise is to have the objective of social good, of creating social good, of having a positive impact on society and on the environment. So that social good is prioritised over just creating a profit. So we explored the social enterprise models, we looked at some examples, we looked at what would an economy look like if it was all of our businesses were run, such as like social enterprises. How could that help us to deal with the problems that we face in the financial sector and in other sectors, the ecological problems we face. So that was really interesting, and we had two speakers. We had Jennifer Hinton, who works for the Post Growth Institute, and we also had a guy called Duncan Law, who founded a transition town, Brixton, which is one of the actually the most famous transition town movements, and he's been really he's done a lot of work in helping people in the local area in Brixton to start their own social enterprise. So he shared some really inspiring stories of social enterprises in Brixton that are creating great change. So that was the second event, and the third event was looking at reinventing organisations. So this was inspired by the kind of awareness that it's great that organisations such as St Ethelburga's, for example, have a real mission to try to create this value shift in society, help to support the transition to happen in society. But also it's really necessary for us as an organisation to really embody the values that we want to see in the world. So there's this new emerging field of organisational change and organisational thinking, which kind of looks at how new models of governance and structure internally within an organisation, how can they reflect the values that they want to see in the world. So for example, self-management, non-hierarchical structure within organisations is one quite famous feature of this. Another example is having very purpose-driven organisations, so having organisations with purpose-driven internally. So those are a few examples of that. So we had a wonderful man called George Paul, who founded an organisation called Future Considerations, and he's worked as a consultant helping many organisations to shift into this new paradigm in their way of governing and working internally. Yes, so we have two events in February. The next one is on alternative finance. We've got a guy called Brett Scott coming, who wrote a book called The Heretic's Guide to Global Finance. He does hacking the financial system and helping communities create their own currencies and be empowered in terms of their financial needs and their community. So he's going to be with us for that event, and that's on the 17th, Wednesday the 17th of February. And then in the final event, we are looking at the commons and cooperative movement. So we're looking at really the general theme of shared ownership and the commons and cooperatives, and how these kinds of models can really help create a lot more equality, a lot more just democratic ownership of our resources. So yeah. So the No Wealth But Life series, which is a series of public events focusing on different themes of new economics, was really inspired out of recognising the need to bring together the fields of peacemaking and community building, which is very much the field that we work in a lot as a Centre for Peace, and also the field of bringing together the peace world with the field of new economics. And the reason that we felt that this was really important at this time is because we really acknowledge and feel that it's very important to be aware of the systemic roots that are the systemic causes of peace. So we feel very strongly that we can't address peacemaking, really the roots of peace, unless we look at the kind of economic structures and political structures that are governing the landscape and that are really fundamental to many of the challenges that we face. So it was really to bring into conversation kind of peacemakers and community builders with new economics, alternative economic practitioners, and to look at what they can kind of really learn from each other and how systemic change can be brought about in a more powerful kind of way. So that was really our inspiration, and in practice we felt very strongly also that the ideas of new economics are becoming more and more well known, and many of the alternatives are kind of very much already out there and are being talked about very much. However, we wanted to create a series that was that was very case study driven, that was really practical, grounded and based in real life tools and practices that anyone kind of interested in this can kind of go away and implement in their own kinds of contexts. So one of the things we felt very strongly is that the time for talking is over, and we really need to look at implementation, practical implementation of these ideas and how we can do it in different contexts. So with that in mind, that's kind of the general shape of the series. It's very difficult. I think there's many different stories happening at the same time. I think that there is one story, sadly, of an old system trying to hold on, of the 1% of people who have ownership over money and over resources and have the power, unfortunately, are very much clinging to that, not wanting to let go of that. And I think it's being driven deeper and deeper into, levels of inequality are just have been rising both nationally and also internationally, and the situation just seems to be worsening in one particular story. But I also, doing a master's at Schumacher College and being really at the hub of all of this, of so many leading edge alternative ways of organising economically, ecologically, of growing food, of doing our economics, of exchanging, of governing. It's just really exciting, and there is such a movement happening on the fringes, which hopefully, when the mainstream, inevitably slowly collapses, which I do believe is going to happen, because it's just absolutely not sustainable in any way at all. Then I think that there is the opportunity for this new economics to just take the centre stage, and for people to say, hey, look, there is an alternative. We don't necessarily need to. Yeah, there's an alternative, basically. So what will happen in 10 years' time? I don't feel like I'm in a position to predict.
Of course.